Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Jeff Pearlman in just a few moments. First of all, our play-by-play call of the day. The Falcons beat the Giants last night at the Mercedes-Benz Dome.
First down and 10. Ryan, another play fake. Matt going to gun it deep. Marvin Hall running a blur. Caught it. Touchdown, Atlanta. Janoris Jenkins couldn't get his RPMs up enough to catch Marvin Hall.
Old friend Wes Durham with the call on the Falcons radio network, and the Giants today then dealt Eli Apple to the New Orleans Saints for a 4 and a 7. All right. I found this book to be absolutely fascinating. Jeff Pearlman, New York Times best-selling author. The book is Football for a Buck, the crazy rise and crazier demise of the USFL. And, Jeff, as a courtesy to you, we did not have you watch an 8-minute video before you came on the show.
About how great your show is.
That's right.
Before coming on this program, you must sit through an 8-minute episode explaining why this show is so fantastic.
Exactly. That's what I do. See, you can tell I read the book.
Yeah,
I figured that out.
Or either that or you visit Trump Tower in the 1980s, one or the other.
Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah. You and I may have inadvertently sat through that 8-minute video at some point in the 80s in Trump Tower.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll get to the president and former General's owner in a moment. I found this book fascinating, and I want to go back. The impetus for us was Mr. Haight telling you there's more to this story. So now, in this lifetime, what did you discover in the more to the story that when you wrote your first paper years ago and got that disappointing B+, that you just never knew before that told you how crazy this league was?
I didn't know any of it. I knew very little. I wrote it. It was Mr. Haight. It was Eric Haight, and it was Mahopac High School. My senior thesis was a 40-page paper on the USFL, which I got to think he didn't read. There's no way he read 40 pages. Like 2 weeks left till summer. Some snot-nosed 18-year-old hands in a 40-page paper on the USFL. I think you're skimming that thing at most. I don't know. I was like I was a kid of the 80s. I loved the USFL. I loved the New Jersey Generals. And I think the thing for me was I was always fascinated by upstarts and the merging of worlds. So, like, guys like Herschel Walker coming to a new league and Steve Young and Jim Kelly, these guys, youth college stars coming to a new league, and then the league dying and those guys going to the NFL. So I knew very, very basic. My knowledge of the USFL was good for a kid growing up in Mahopac, New York, but until I wrote this book, I didn't know nearly. When people ask me that question, like, what did you learn? I always feel like saying the book is, 350 pages, 349 pages are pretty much what I learned that I didn't know.
Right. What's interesting is I always have felt that the original concept of the USFL, regional, the Philadelphia Stars were associated with Penn State and so forth, I thought was a brilliant idea that I thought could have lasted had they gone through with it. Now, John Bassett was obviously a big believer in this model. Tell us a little bit about John Bassett, because he tried the World Football League, and he's actually one of the few people Donald Trump would listen to.
Well, John Bassett, the owner of the Bandits, is sort of the hero. It's interesting. I've had some discussions with people about turning the USFL into a film or a TV show, and they say, Donald Trump is probably the villain, who's the hero? And I really think the hero is John Bassett. He's the owner of the Bandits. He had a World League team in Memphis. He believed in the idea of spring football, slow growth, 1 or 2 stars per team, and then you're going to kind of fill out the roster with regional guys. And he was the best. And the best thing I found this entire book, my money find, was a letter he wrote to Donald Trump on August 16th, 1984, on Tampa Bay Bandits letterhead. He was the owner of the Bandits, Trump was the owner of the Generals, and included my favorite paragraph of all time, which is, "You're bigger, younger, and stronger than I, which means I'll have no regrets whatsoever punching you right in the mouth the next time an instance occurs where you personally scorn me or anyone else who doesn't happen to salute and dance to your tune." He just saw Trump for what he considered him to be, which was a con man. And he would tell anyone who would listen, this guy is a con man. I can't believe we're listening to him. And this is going to sound like a political statement, and maybe it is. I think had John Bassett lived, he would be, I don't even know, beyond shocked that the same, because a lot of the same tactics Trump used with the USFL, he really did use in running for the presidency. I don't even think that's a political statement, because if you read about the USFL, you see a very similar playbook.
What's interesting, too, is that you talk about getting the 1 or 2 stars. Obviously, Herschel Walker, there was not a rule in place in 1980. You had to have, in order to be a guy that could go to the NFL early, you had to graduate. Todd Blackledge did, Mike Munchak did from Penn State. Yet Herschel Walker leaves after his 3rd year at Georgia. The irony is, if you're a Penn State fan, there is contact with the USFL before the Sugar Bowl, just like there was contact with Mike Rozier before he played the year after. And by the way, J. Walter Duncan was the owner of the Generals originally, the Oklahoma oil man. How did that process play? How did they get Herschel Walker? Because the NFL wasn't going to touch him. How did they possibly get him to go over?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. So, like you said, the NFL wasn't taking underclassmen back then. So you had to play your 4 years of college. And Herschel Walker, after his 3rd year, he's from Wrightsville, Georgia. He's from a very poor family. He won the Heisman Trophy winner as a junior. He won a national championship. He was, I always say for younger fans, it's almost hard to picture nowadays, he was an iconic national football player. You know, wouldn't you agree? Like, Herschel Walker wasn't just Cam Newton comes along or, Jay Bartlett. Like, he was a different level. He was a sort of a holy deity of football at the time.
Well,
but he didn't want to go
let me
back
tell
to
you,
Georgia.
I'll give you one that will help you on that. That will help the fans. I did the pregame show with Joe Paterno before the Sugar Bowl, and I asked him about Herschel Walker, and the guy he compared him to was Jim Brown.
Right. And the guy people are comparing Bo Jackson to is Herschel Walker. Like, it's that sort of, those guys were that sort of rare air kind of football players. And he didn't want to go back to college. He wanted to help his family eat. And the NFL wouldn't touch him. So he had a sort of representative, quote unquote, named Jack Manton, who reached out to the USFL on his behalf, called the offices and said, Herschel wants to come out. And, there was a lot of back and forth. We really debated it for a long time. Do we want to do this? Do we want to break this sort of rule about underclassmen? Will the colleges even allow our scouts on campus if we do this? And ultimately, they decided to go for it. And the funny thing is, as soon as the USFL got serious about Herschel Walker, the Dallas Cowboys reached out to him and said, if you want to come to the NFL, we can figure out a way to sign you early. And he said, no, I already gave my word to the Generals. And the USFL gave him a choice of where he wanted to play. He could pick any team. He could pick New York, New Jersey. And it was the first real sort of terrifying moment for the NFL. And there were many terrifying moments in relation to the USFL.
And no question about that. Yet the Generals aren't really great in that first season, and the USFL gets through that first season, but they get an infusion of new ownership. We mentioned Donald Trump buying the New Jersey Generals, and because Duncan gets sick of flying back and forth from Oklahoma, and Bill Oldenburg taking over in Los Angeles. Now they're going to go about the business of trying to sign one of the genuinely nicest people on the planet in Steve Young, with a pro's pro who's not an idiot in any way, shape, or form, in Lee Steinberg, and Oldenburg treats them like garbage and he still signs.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So, Young was coming out. He was going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in 1984. And the Cincinnati Bengals had the number 1 pick. And he did not want to go to Cincinnati. Number 1, the weather. Number 2, the franchise. Number 3, Ken Anderson was their quarterback, and he was really good. So he just didn't want to go there. And the USFL comes along, and the USFL fixed their draft up and down. It was all fixed. Like, the number 1 pick that year was Mike Rozier from Nebraska, and the Maulers were given the number 1 pick after everyone said they won the lottery, but the truth was USFL fixed it because they said they could sign him. Steve Young would have been the number 1 pick. He was the number 1 player on anyone's draft board, and he actually went 10th in the draft to the LA Express. And basically he said they reached out to him and said, if you could play anywhere, where would it be? And he said, well, I'd play in LA. So they made him LA's property, and the team was owned by this guy, Bill Oldenburg, who's he was an SNL guy, absolutely crazy, wasn't financially sort of stable, at least not as much as he thought he was. And they offered Steve Young this crazy, it was a $40 million deal, but it was really an annuity. So it was $40 million over a bunch of different years. It was kind of a different kind of deal. And they go to negotiate the deal at Oldenburg. They go to finalize the deal at Oldenburg's office in San Francisco, and it's Oldenburg's birthday. And he's this little guy, and he drinks a lot, and he's getting drunker and drunker. And Lee Steinberg and Steve Young are downstairs negotiating with Oldenburg's people, and it's taking a long time. And he keeps coming down the steps or down the elevator. What the hell is going on here? Why is this taking so long? Well, Mr. Oldenburg, it takes a while. An hour later, what the hell is going on? Why is this? He's getting drunker and drunker. Finally, he buzzes down and he says, get Steve Young and Lee Steinberg up here now. And he's completely wasted, and he's just waiting. He wanted it to be done so he can go out with his friends for his birthday. There are all these glass jars atop a bar in his office. He smashes them all. He's in the penthouse. He takes a chair and he's about to throw it out the penthouse window. He's jabbing Steve Young in the chest, saying, F you, F the Mormon church, blah, blah, blah. And finally, at 2 in the morning, he kicks Steve Young and Lee Steinberg out of the office. He says, I should have never dealt with you guys. You guys are frauds. And Lee Steinberg and Steve Young, the most powerful agent in sports, and, the soon-to-be highest-paid player for football, are standing on a street at 2 a.m. in San Francisco. And the next day, a sober and somewhat humbled Bill Oldenburg calls and apologizes. And Steve Young consults with a bunch of people and decides he should still take the money, and he does.
One thing that it would be, history's a great teacher of any lesson. The USFL took the immediate cash and went from 12 to 18 teams. So they took the immediate expansion cash, which is a nice infusion. But what did that do to dilute the league?
Oh, my God. Well, first of all, they didn't do very good background checks on some of their owners. So they did a few things that were really stupid. Number one, they went to Tulsa. Tulsa's the best example. The Oklahoma Outlaws, who had great helmets, great uniforms, Doug Williams as their quarterback. The USFL sometimes just did the worst background checks ever. The Tulsa franchise was going to be in San Diego, and at the last minute, the stadium authority in San Diego would not let them play at what later became Qualcomm Stadium. So they decided to go to Tulsa. And the University of Tulsa had reported that their football team had averaged 30,000 fans per game the year before. So the ownership group thought, all right, we'll go to Tulsa. And it turns out they were just lying. They literally just made that number up. They averaged about 17,000. So the Outlaws come there, and they're expecting these huge crowds because they didn't do any research into their research, and they can't draw anyone. They moved to San Antonio. They play in a converted high school stadium called the Alamo Stadium. The owner is this guy, Clinton Mangus, this complete fraud oil and gas guy. The Gunslingers are the greatest franchise of all time. Their general manager was a Korean War vet whose only prior management experience was running a feed store. Their coach had last coached Texas A&I 8 years earlier. He was in early onset dementia, and he only had 7 fingers because 3 of them were lost in a lawnmower accident. And he coached from the stands next to his wife because he thought he had a better view. The management, they signed their star was Rick Neuheiser, the quarterback from UCLA.
Yep.
And early on, before games started, they had one of the guys asked Rick, "What do you think we should do? How should we provide the visiting teams their uniforms for the games?" They actually didn't understand that teams come with their own uniforms. It was my favorite. I think my favorite is they didn't. They were super, super cheap, and their field was basically a thin layer of turf over cement, and they used industrial spray paint to spray their field instead of sort of skin friendly. So players would slide on this field, and they would get these huge skin burns, but the paint would rub off into the burns. So the burns were bad enough as is, but there'd be paint infecting the burns. And the team was so cheap they would never clean the field. So one guy was telling me, it's 100 degrees in San Antonio in the spring. People are getting these infections. Everyone's getting pustules and big scabs, and because they were so cheap, they never cleaned the field. So it was just a walking cesspool of hell. Those are the Gunslingers.
In fact, Rick was here about 15 months ago here in State College. And for whatever reason, during the conversation, the USFL came up, and he said, when we got checks, it was a race to the bank to see which ones would get cashed and which ones would bounce.
Well, let me tell you, my favorite player in that whole league is this guy, Greg Fields. He was the defensive lineman out of Grambling.
The one that tried to kill John Hadel.
Yeah, so he was cut by the LA Express. John Hadel was the head coach. He punched John Hadel in the face, and the team hired Liberace's bodyguard away from Liberace to protect John Hadel. And then, only because the USFL is the USFL, and this stuff would only happen there, even though this is well known that he punched his coach, it's literally in the news, the Gunslingers need defensive line help. So they signed Greg Fields. Then they stopped paying Greg Fields, and one day he follows the owner home in his Buick, and he has a baseball bat in his trunk. And this guy, Greg Fields, was about 6'6", 280. Little Clint Mangus gets out of his car. There's Greg Fields holding a baseball bat. And he says, I see where you live. I know you have money. I think you should pay me. And Clint Mangus goes inside and comes back out with a paper bag filled with $17,000 in cash and says, are we good? And Greg Fields is never seen again.
Oh, all right. It was no secret that Donald Trump, no matter what he would say to the face of the other owners, look, what he wanted was an NFL team, and he wanted to go to Shea Stadium, have a stadium built in Manhattan, probably have it named after him, and then be in the NFL. I mean, he pretty much made no secret of that to people around him. I mean, is that essentially how this story goes, where it just takes them down the hole they can't go down?
It's very interesting, actually. This has been the weirdest. The simultaneous having a book come out about the USFL while Donald Trump is running for president, and people would say, God, you're so biased against Trump. And I always say this, and I really mean this. You could take Sean Hannity, you could take Chris Matthews. Give them a year and a half to research the USFL and see how they feel about Trump as a president, because everything he did. So he buys a team after the first USFL season, and all he does in the lead-up is praise how great the USFL is. I love spring football. It's just wonderful. As soon as he gets a team, we need to move to fall. We need to take on the NFL directly. And he actually does something that I really think passes pro logic. He arranges a meeting with Pete Rozelle, the NFL commissioner, at the Pierre Hotel in New York City. Trump pays for the suite. And he says to Rozelle during this meeting, I don't give a crap about the USFL. I want an NFL team. What do I have to do to get in the NFL? He's basically offering to throw the USFL under the bus in order to get an NFL team. And Rozelle knows Trump's reputation. He knows Trump a little, and he says, as long as I'm the commissioner of this league, as long as my heirs are affiliated with the NFL, they'll have nothing to ever do with it. And I say, and I really believe this 100%, when you see Donald Trump lashing out at the NFL, when you see him, complaining about the kneeling and blah, 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 this is a guy who tried buying the Colts in the early 80s and failed. He tried meeting with Pete Rozelle and failed. He tried suing the NFL and failed. He tried buying the Buffalo Bills and failed. And he tried buying the New England Patriots and failed. It's just a lifetime of setbacks and shortcomings and rejections with the NFL that started really with the USFL.
I mentioned earlier that history is the greatest teacher. The USFL this is a league that had Reggie White, had Jim Kelly. Of course, how Jim Kelly got to Houston's another story. But, Herschel Walker. Look, they had some good football. And not only that, Houston and the Express had a playoff game that, is one of the greatest games, very few people didn't see. I watched it. It was awesome. One of the best playoff games I've ever seen. But in the end, what are some lessons out of this league that is a lesson for anybody who wants to get into sports?
It's a basic life lesson, which is you got to walk before you can run. And they had this nice thing going. They knew they were going to lose money early on. That was all part of it. But it was very repeatedly stated, you're going to lose money early on. We're starting a sports league. But give it patience, give it time. And, John Bassett early on was asked during one of the owner meetings. He said, you were in the World League. What's the key to survival? He took a drag of his cigarette, and he said, every week 6 teams are going to win and 6 teams are going to lose. And what he was trying to say is ultimately it's just football, and it's take its time and let it develop and let it cultivate itself. And they just rushed it and got panicky and followed Donald Trump's lead, and they wanted to take the NFL on directly, which was suicide. I do think it was a great idea. I think if they had given him more time and they just exercised patience, I don't know if it'd still be around, but it would have been around a lot longer.
I mean, look, because Tampa Bay was fun with Steve Spurrier. I guess Denver, the first year, actually made a little bit of money, although he's an extremely cheap owner.
That's why he made money. Jacksonville did great. Memphis did great. I mean, if you really think about it, the NFL players' strike happened in 1987. And I really think if the USFL just held out till then, you would have had this sort of football anarchy. And I think the NFL probably would have wanted to nip it in the bud. Jacksonville was drawing 40,000 a game in the USFL without having a particularly good team. Memphis drew well. Baltimore was, after the Colts left, the Baltimore Stars were the best team in football. Oakland with the Invaders had a really good thing going. Birmingham, a really interesting market. I just think 4 or 5 of those teams, maybe 6, would have wound up in the NFL.
I agree with you. Look, to be honest with you, this is an interview that could go on probably for 2 hours because I have still another 90 minutes worth of questions or at least fun stories about the league. I mean, seriously, that's how much I enjoyed the book. You know, the Cliff Stout part and things like that. Because Jack Ham was asking me. Jack's my broadcast partner for Penn State football.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, by the way, Jack, you're in the book. He goes, I am, because Banaszak mentioned him. And and Cliff Stout's name came up. And, of course, Cliff Stout goes back to Pittsburgh and has a day to forget. But after doing nothing in Pittsburgh,
you know what's funny? Can I just say one thing that's funny about that? So Cliff Stout, he was the Steelers quarterback when Bradshaw was hurt. And I guess 82, I think. 82 or 83. 82. Or maybe 83. Anyway, and he has the audacity of signing with the USFL. He hated in Pittsburgh. Like, why wouldn't he sign with the USFL? But Pittsburgh fans are just really sort of bothered that he decides to sign with the USFL. And the Birmingham Stallions come to play the Pittsburgh Maulers, and it's a snowy, freezing day in Pittsburgh. And the fans in Three Rivers just spend the entire afternoon throwing ice chunks at Cliff Stout's head. That's basically what it is.
Yeah. It's amazing. But they were a fun league. Every established league, this will be the final question because I know I've got to let you go. Every established league gets something from a league that was an upstart. You know, and you see it today in the three-point shot in the NBA. You see certain elements of the WHA with the European influence in the NHL and so forth. What did the NFL get from the USFL?
Man, ton of things. Number one, a ton of good players, almost 200 players, 4 Hall of Famers, Steve Young, Jim Kelly, Reggie White, Gary Zimmerman. The run-and-shoot offense, which the Houston Gamblers or Jim Kelly, they were running. They went right to Detroit when the USFL folded. The two-point conversion, the coach's challenge, fun end-zone celebrations, wide receivers wearing uniform numbers 1 through 19. I mean, on and on and on and on. And the biggest one that players don't realize, and it's unfortunate, is if you look at the salary scale in professional football, it just skyrockets between 1983 and 85. That's when players, again, whenever Le'Veon Bell signs with Pittsburgh, whatever he makes, he should at least tip his hat toward the USFL, because the reason money exploded in pro football was the USFL's presence.
Jeff, it was awesome. And like I said, I could go 2 more hours, really. I really could. But I appreciate the time that you gave us today because I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did as well.
Yeah, thanks for reading the book. That means a lot to me. It really does.
It does. This is Football for a Buck, the crazy rise and crazier demise of the USFL. I already have a color analyst I work with that's going to borrow it, okay, because his name's in it.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah,
thanks,
I'm comfortable
Jeff.
with that.
Right. Jeff, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
wow, that was fun. That was fun. I really had a great time with that. All right, bottom of the hour. Did the meeting? I wonder if the meeting finally broke up in the studio. According to Sean, there was a lot of yelling and screaming. We'll come back with more in a moment as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
And that caller's exactly right. Be smart, listen on the mark. Absolutely. Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. sitting at an undisclosed airport thinking that Le'Veon Bell might show up. It still isn't there. Neal Coolong, USA Today. Neal, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
It's good to be here as always. I didn't think they had jet skis out in Johnstown right now, but
all right.
I suppose it's possible.
It's Jack Ham's hometown, man. A lot of things happen there. So. All right. It's a bye week. So how did you feel about the timing of the bye week?
I think it worked out well in the sense that it gave them a chance to sit back and watch three divisional teams lose.
Yes.
With a very beatable team coming up in Week 8 and the possibility of probably the biggest mid-season acquisition the team has ever made right on deck. And it's a good time for a lot of things. It's nice that the Steelers kind of by default take over first place with a really weird first place record, but this is the time of the year they pick up steam a little bit, and you can kind of see why. The way they seem to go about the early season is almost like an extended preseason in a way. I don't mean that necessarily as a compliment. I mean that they need a couple games to kind of figure out what they want to do and what kind of team they are. Right. And toward the end of the year, they tend to get a lot better. And I think they're allegedly anyway. We'll find out probably the next 24 hours or so if Le'Veon Bell was serious when he said he was going to show up, quote, after the bye week in an effort to play in Week 8 against Cleveland. Now there's a couple qualifications to that may prevent that from happening for another week. But with it, I think they're in a good place, and I think they did well the last 2 weeks working into the bye, and now it's really time to get to work.
Okay, yeah. I mean, regardless of whether Bell shows up or not, and I'm in the camp, by the way, that says he's not going to show up. But when you look at, I want to go to the defensive side, Sean Davis. Troy Polamalu early in his career struggled a bit because Troy Polamalu could not line himself up correctly. It took Sean Davis a little bit to do that. Now you're seeing a little bit of that with Edmonds. What does it tell you about the difficulty in this league and what initial positioning means to players out there that I think fans would take for granted?
I think above all else, the safety position is all about positioning. You have to know exactly where to go at the start of the snap because that's exactly what the quarterback is reading. You ask any of them, their first look is at the safety. With that, you can't be out of position. You can't be close to the wrong position because NFL receivers, believe it or not, are really fast. They can get down the field and exploit a very small window. It doesn't take much for them to be open for a quarterback to deliver a catchable ball. So if you're a step off, you're not really going to be in position to be competitive on a pass. And we've absolutely seen that from Sean Davis, Terrell Edmonds. The list goes on of Steelers safeties over the last couple of years, probably since at least on the free end of it, since Ryan Clark, Chris Hope, guys that probably played in a little less complex of a passing era. It's very difficult for them. The safety position has become a lot more challenging, I think, than in the past. But the basics are you have to understand what everyone else in the secondary is doing and where your position where it materializes, when you're going to have to break into something else. Defenses today, they're fluid. It really depends on what receivers are doing, and you have to pick up different players breaking into different places. It's not just as simple as you're in cover 2, you always play cover 2. Defenses rotate, they flex. It puts a lot of pressure on the safety because the safety, again, that's the guy the quarterback is keying off of for at least a couple of his routes. Yep. So for the younger guys to jump in as early as they have, you kind of expect them to take their knocks. And there have been some plays I think that both of them probably could have made considering where they were drafted. But they've held themselves up at times as well, and you kind of hope that with a bit more experience, they can figure out pre-snap more than anything else, be able to diagnose what the opponent is doing and get themselves in a position to react to it.
I want to talk about two first-round picks, two former first-round picks, Bud Dupree and T.J. Watt. How would you evaluate each of them to this stage?
I think both, and take this with a grain of salt, I think both have been better this season than I thought they were going to be. Let's start with Dupree. I think he's caused a little bit more havoc than I thought that he would. The switch over to that side of the field, I think, is fitting more of the type of player that he's eventually going to become. I thought he would be a big-time speed rusher considering his athleticism. He seems to play better in strength, kind of holding that base side down. They flipped that around in a lot of ways within the Steelers' defense, where it seems more now Watt is going to be more of a pass rusher. He's getting better. He really just didn't have any kind of counter move last year. We've seen him a couple times now put a few decent moves on there and take out the Cleveland game because the Steelers feast on Cleveland quarterbacks like it was Thanksgiving. I'm not going to put him in the Hall of Fame because of his performances against the Browns, but he played really well against the Falcons. He did some good things against the Bengals. They got a decent amount of pressure against what should be what should have been anyway a very fluid, very experienced offense. They did a great job in that game. I really felt overall the two of them took good strides over the first 7 games of this season, and there's hope for them yet. There's still a lot more things that they need to work on, and in general, you really kind of have to take your hat on to the front 7 over the last 2 games. I bashed them up and down for the way that they had played when they were losing and tying every team they played, but they've done really well the last 2 games. You hope you can keep that up against once again a team that really struggles to protect the quarterback in Cleveland. But you have to like what you're seeing from them so far. The quarterback a little bit more often, and they're getting pressure more than anything. For Watt, I'm worried about his run contain still a little bit. He tends to take an extra step deep into the backfield when he probably doesn't need to. Teams exploit that. But Dupree has really done a good job on his side, kind of locking things down and disrupting the quarterback, causing pressure, if not getting sacks.
Okay, they do have Cleveland coming up. The baffling opening week tie, and it was baffling. How much better is Cleveland? Because they are the masters of getting to overtime.
Yeah, Cleveland knows how to play to the opponent's score within 4 quarters. You have to worry about that. And from there, you have to involve the coin toss. But I think we're starting to see more Cleveland getting back to sort of what we thought they were going to be. We do this every year. The rookie quarterback is awesome. He's lighting the world up, and then he plays a second game, and he plays a third game, and you realize that he's a rookie again. We're starting to see that a bit from Mayfield. And it's not that Mayfield isn't going to be a good player. It's not that Sam Darnold isn't going to be a good player. It's that he's a rookie, and when you lose the element of surprise, in other words, you put out enough film, the teams figure out what you're doing, what the offense is doing with you, it's easier to game plan for, and the quarterback isn't what you're doing. They're going to struggle a little bit more. I think that's what we're seeing from Cleveland now. They can fight. They can compete. It's not yesterday. It's not the Browns of yesteryear. Let's put it that way. We're going to see a competitive team, but overall, the talent isn't quite there. It's pretty obvious they're on a 2 or 3 year plan. But you're going to see them compete. I kind of figured this is what they were going to be like this season. Feisty team. I think they could get to 4 or 5 wins, maybe even 6. It won't be an easy game for the Steelers to win, but coming off a bye at home, the Steelers are a pretty tough team to beat. So overall, you have to like the direction the Browns are going in, but I think now that the Steelers have more reps under their belt and they have more film on Cleveland, but regardless of the quarterback, they've got plenty to look at now with Mayfield out there. I don't think they're going to have too much of a problem. Feel free to use that soundbite for next week if that's not the case. I still don't quite trust the Steelers' pass defense, but they're good enough to beat the Browns. I think it'll be a relatively competitive game, but they can swing it out with them.
Yeah. Well, we won't play the soundbite back. We've got your back. We don't do that to you.
Well, thank you.
And then one final part. I think you alluded to this earlier, but injury-wise, they come out of the bye week in good shape, right?
Yeah, it looks pretty good. They actually might see Morgan Burnett make the field. That's a little odd, but keeping in traditions with Steelers free agent signing free safeties, he misses most of the first season he's there. So
he fits right in.
you get him out there, and I think you have a different look on defense, and you're a little bit deeper. You don't have to probably play the rookie as often. Not to say that Edmonds is terrible. He's taking his lumps. He's out there competing, though. He's made a couple plays. But you get Burnett there. Burnett knows what's going on. He can help kind of direct the defense. The whole unit will get a lot stronger if he's able to get out there. Right? Then I think you're really going to start to see the defense that the Steelers hoped that they were going to have this season. And considering they haven't really had that, 3-2-1 after the bye with a game against Cleveland at home, you kind of have to like where they sit. We've also seen the best and the worst, I think, from the rest of the division. This is going to be a battle. This one's going to go straight through to Week 17, I think. And, the bye might actually turn out into the Steelers' advantage. I don't know how that work exactly, but the Steelers can win, a good majority of the games that they have left if they can keep everybody healthy. And Mike even said that at the start of his press conference today. We have a regularly healthy team, it seems like now. So good things are coming, I think.
Neal, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Neal Coolong, USA Today. We'll wrap things up in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors.
Forget trick or treat. Sunbury Motors Ford is giving you all treats because they have to sell 7 new Fords every day now through Halloween. That's right, now through Halloween, they're doing what it takes to sell 7 new Fords every day. Just listen, Ford Escapes from under 20 grand. SMC has 53 2018 Escapes from $19,320. Choose from over 61 2018 F-150 trucks starting at $25,969. They've sold over 40,000 Ford trucks over the past 103 years and needs to sell 7 Fords every day now through Halloween. Buy a 2018 Ford Explorer starting at $31,705. SMC has 22 to choose from. There's also 13 2018 Ford Edges from $25,390. SMC is making it easier than ever because they need to sell 7 new Fords every day now through Halloween. Sunbury Motors Ford in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.
All right, wrapping it up for today. Great to have you with us. Penn State Saturday takes on Iowa, 3:30 the kick, 2 o'clock the airtime. It is a bye week for Bucknell. We'll get Joe Susan back on next week. But our high school football roundtable is coming up on Thursday. And the King will actually be in Sunbury on Friday. He will be there.
So guess who caught wind of that?
Oh, yeah. Is it a 4-letter word for disaster?
Well, it is a 4-letter word, but he goes by the name of Corey. Corey at Brewers Outlet.
Oh,
I get a text. So I get a text
Corey.
from. So I get a text from Corey.
I'm talking about the suit.
So I get a text from Corey yesterday. He goes, "What's this about Steve's brother? I hear he's coming to town. What's going on?" And I, yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, he'll be in the area, and he's got Brewers Outlet marked on his bucket list. So I've been kind of going back and forth with Corey, and I've been going back and forth with your brother to set up what time they'll be getting in the area and what time Kevo will be landing at or near Sunbury. I said, can you give me an estimate, 12, 12:30, something like that? So got a time earlier today from Kevin, set it up with Corey, because Corey said, I want to meet Steve's brother. I'd love to meet him. True, he said to me in a text last night. So I said, okay, let me get with Kev, and let me figure out when he'll be in, because I want to make sure, Corey, you are there when Kev shows up at your place. So yeah, they're right around lunchtime on Friday. Kev and Claire will be cruising into Brewers Outlet, and then I get a reply back today from Corey. I'll have samples. So now I have a deep concern. He may not show up in the studio by 3. He may still be down at Brewers Outlet.
Can you blame him?
I may have to take some remote gear down for him. He can hang at Brewers Outlet for the show.
Well, I can't thank Corey enough.
Yeah.
That's really nice of Corey to do. Because obviously, I think the world of my brother. John, to be honest with you, the Friday thing for him is the greatest thing going. I can't begin to tell you how much Kevin enjoys it. I mean,
and the funny part, I thought of this yesterday when we had Tim Neverett on, because we had Tim on originally back in July of 2016, and you were on location doing a Spikes game.
I was in Lowell.
Yep, you were up in Lowell for a couple of days. We came out of a commercial break, and out of the blue, and you gave me no heads up as we were talking during the commercial break. Out of the blue, I got an idea. Why don't we have our brother? Why don't I have my brother on, and we'll pick some football games. We'll have some fun. So boom, it just kind of happened, spur of the moment, and
I've been wanting to do it, okay, because he really does follow this stuff. So it's not like I'm bringing on somebody that doesn't know what he's talking about, because he does. All right. And I think in a lot of ways, he echoes the voice of the average fan. So, he's going to go to the game Saturday. So, and I was able to get him inside. So, Saturday night may not be the greatest weather day going. So, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. All I know is that I spent last night and then this morning stacking 2 cords of wood.
Oh, 'tis the season. It's coming.
Well, I finished it. Oh no, I got it done.
Nice.
I did about an hour last night after basketball practice. And I did about 2 hours and 15 minutes this morning. So it took me 3 hours and 15 minutes to stack 2 cords. Now, for those of you out there who have done it, you're saying, man, you're slow. But I still got it done.
That's right.
It's all sitting there.
Wood heater on standby, ready to go.
In other words, I can do probably a little bit more than a half cord an hour. And there's some people out there right now going, man, are you slow? But I had to take it from the driveway down to the back, so I had to use a wheelbarrow to get it back there.
That's got it's a little ways.
So, so next time Jack Ham says to me, probably on Saturday, when was the last time you worked out? Hey, I stacked 2 cords of wood. Yeah, you worked out all right. All right, today's show brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street at Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
You're listening to News Radio 1070 WKOK Sunbury. You can hear us anywhere in the world with the Sunbury Broadcasting Corporation app.